As introduced, I'm a researcher in health and longevity, and tonight I'll be talking about, as I click through the blank screens, the tiers of longevity interventions. So I've been doing study for a long time, trying to find out what it is that really makes a difference in our lives, things that we can do that will help us to live healthier and longer. So in doing that, I've come up with actual tiers to say these are the things that will give you the most benefit. And my hope is that by listening to my talk tonight, you'll have a better understanding of what are the things that you could change in your habits or diet that would make a material difference in how healthy and how long you live. So also, I've been trying to put this together into an Unaging challenge, which will be starting January 6th of next year, and I'll talk more about that later as well. So the last time that I was here, I had just run a marathon. And here you can behold the joy and glory, the sheer pleasure of running a marathon. So I was very happy. I was able to run it in 3 hours and 26 minutes. Thank you. My first and maybe last marathon. Basically, I had gone through all the training and trying to do the research to find how to do that in the best time possible. And afterwards, I've been doing the health research for a while. One of my friends said, I'm really impressed that you're able to do that just for your first marathon ever. I need help getting able to walk upstairs without being out of breath. I want you to come up with an exercise program for me. So I'm like, okay, well, I have been doing the research. So then I started to think of, okay, well, what would I put into it? What's the critical components that I would teach someone to say, okay, give me a plan from the beginning? And it actually changed the way I think of it, because it's easy to say these are all good things, and they give kind of a list of things. When you say, no, this person has this much time to exercise, what should they do with that time? So as I look through that, the first thing that I started to do is come up with basically what are the biggest payoffs? What do you get the most benefit for in terms of longevity? And so then I came up with data. So I'll get more into this. This is basically the summary, and I'll be going into this. You don't have to photograph this or anything. I'll go into more detail in each section. But these are then all the interventions that you could do with your life and how much life you would get for each of them. Okay? So let me go into, before I go into, we got the S tier, A tier, A, B, C, D, and neutral. And let me tell you about the process, because one of the things I've been asked is, okay, well, this sounds great. What study is this from? This is from more than one study. So for each of these things, and at the very top here, I'll use a later pointer here, for walking, which is the S tier, the first thing I do is I go to Google Scholar, and I say, okay, well, tell me about walking and all-cause mortality. If I walk, how much longer will I live? And unfortunately, generally you can't get a good answer for this. Even if I go to ChatGPT and ask it in that way, it won't tell me. So instead what I'll get is I'll get studies like this, the Association of Daily Step Count and Mortality Among U.S. Adults. So I'll go through all these studies and try and see, okay, well, what's the numbers behind it though? Because this still is not telling me how much longer I'm going to live. And so then as I go through the study, eventually I'll find something that'll tell me what the hazard ratio is for all-cause mortality, right? So if you walk 12,000 steps a day, your hazard ratio for dying will go down from 100% to 0.35. So it's a 65% reduction in your chance of dying. Now, unfortunately, that doesn't mean you're going to live 65% longer. It's not the way the math works. So what it's saying is that if you had, say, a 1% chance of dying for your age and gender that year, but you walked 12,000 steps every day, then instead of having a 1% chance of dying, you would have a 0.35% chance of dying that particular year, right? And you can run that all the way out. But again, this is not telling me, well, how much time do I get out of this? So then I would take that information then, and I would put that into an actuarial table. So this is the table then that tells you for every year of your life, and this is based off of the United States, so the SSA.gov website tells you what your chance of dying is every year. And so then I apply the hazard ratio to this and then do, okay, did you die this year? Yes, no. And then, okay, here, then that was your average life. And then next year, and then take it instead of 1% chance of dying, 0.35% chance of dying next year. And you can get an expected lifespan. All clear, right? Okay, we'll have questions later. So then with each of these then, I go through each of the interventions and say, okay, once I've tracked it down to a hazard ratio, how much more life is it going to give me? And so then we can come up with a table like this. So here's the basis behind, if you have a hazard ratio, this will then tell you basically how much more years of life you could get from this. And the years of life here are, as a benchmark, I've used a 40-year-old male, And if you're older than that, you're not going to get quite as much time. If you're younger than that, you'll get more time. If you're a woman, you'll get a little less time because you live longer. So it all comes through, but then now I can take a look at, say, okay, if this gives, say, a 12% decrease in mortality, then that means I'm going to get about another year of life out of it, right? So now I can convert from having a hazard ratio for mortality, premature death, and convert that into something that will tell me how much more extra life on average. There are no guarantees here. I still have to walk out into the street after this is over and ride trains and other things. But on average, how much longer I could expect to live or hope to live. So then going through all the interventions then, I go into each of them and say, okay, well, let's take a look and see how that affects things, right? So if I look at, say, walking, which is the S-tier intervention, this is 7 extra years of life from the 65% reduction in all-cause mortality. It's huge. Like this is like number one, and if you read Brian Johnson or Peter Attia or the other experts, they don't even talk about walking because it doesn't show up in any of your biomarkers or anything. Like, you just live longer and healthier. You sleep better. Maybe you lose some weight, like not Ozempic weight, but maybe you lose some weight. And you have a better life for it, but you won't notice that in your cholesterol or other things, maybe a little bit in the blood pressure. But they just find that the people who do this live another 7 years. So this is the S tier, the number one intervention, walking 12,000 steps a day. Then after that, we get to something which is, I think of the A tier as being the active tier, because these are generally the physical activities. They give you the most reward for your effort. So here we have things like aerobic exercise, basically jogging or riding your bicycle or something. Strength training also comes here. You get an extension for life for that. And then also we have high-intensity interval training. So if you looked at exercise before, this is where you do 100% effort. You try to get your heart rate to 90 to 100% of your maximum heart rate. And then you rest and run a little slower for a while, and then you run back again at your maximum heart rate. And this then on top of doing the aerobic exercise of doing a jog, if you combine these two of them together, then it gives you another like 4 years of life. It's amazing. It has other benefits as well, but just in the straight life, this is enough to justify it. Some other things on here that are a little different is sauna is one of them. It's a very common habit in Finland. Not so much back in America, but I find I can go down to my local bath here in Japan and get a good sauna. But it has really strong benefits that are it's about a 40% reduction in all-cause mortality. And then one other thing, if you look at walking, you'll notice that there's the green part here, which is the benefit you can get, and then there's a gray part over here to the left. And this is basically where the average person is. So when I say 12,000 steps, the average person is already walking 3 to 4,000 steps is pretty normal, assuming you're not staying in bed all day long, every day. You're getting at least probably 3,000 or 4,000 steps or so. So for each of these, I say if I were to recommend this, how much would the average person get for it? But of course, we're all special, and none of us are average here. So if you're not walking at all, then you might get more benefit out of them or less. But also the red items are things that are to be avoided. So smoking is no fast breaking news here, is one of the most dangerous things you can do. And this is the average person across everyone, but of course you're either smoking or you're not. So if you're smoking, you'll get the whole benefit of this bar, and it's as valuable as walking. So then we got down to the next tier, which is the B tier interventions, and I think of this as the basics. And there are some things on here that I think are quite surprising. One, and I was super happy to find this because I like coffee quite a bit, is that drip coffee is one of the top ones in the basic tier. It's very healthy for you. And this is one of the areas where you can do either of these things. You can either drink drip coffee or black or green tea, because half of the benefit is from the caffeine. You won't get double of this if you do both. But half of the benefit appears to be from the caffeine, because I can tell this because they have very good studies in the UK about drinking coffee and tea. And they tell you that basically if you drink decaffeinated coffee, you only get half of that bar, and we'll get to that in the lower tiers. And on the flip side of it, the other half of it appears to be some of the chemicals inside of it, and if you drink instant coffee, you get the other half. You get the caffeine part, but not the chemical part. And if you're drinking instant decaffeinated coffee, I don't know what you're doing here. So Then the next side of it is we get into the things that are basically the whole grains and then nuts and olive oil, glucosamine. I'll say something about that in a fish. So the whole grains is actually one of the best sources of fiber in your diet. Oftentimes when you say you should have more fiber in your diet, it's healthy, people think that's fruits and vegetables. But actually, for calorie consumption, whole grains is the best source of this. And these are things that are sometimes unfairly impugned as not as healthy, like a granola bar or ultra-processed cereal like Cheerios. Counts. Good. I ate a lot of those as a kid. Whole nut, grape nuts, or other things. Unfortunately, rice doesn't count. Sorry, it's a little bit over-refined. Even if you're getting the wild rice and stuff, it just doesn't have as much fiber as like a whole fiber or a whole wheat pasta or a whole bread. Then the most efficient thing, and I think I might have talked about this before in my last talk, is actually nuts and olive oil. This appears to be the monounsaturated fats because there's not much other shared between nuts and olive oils, but they both have the same profile of a huge benefit for a small dose. So we're talking about like a very small handful, like 20 grams, like less than an ounce of nuts a day, gives a 17% reduction in all-cause mortality. Like just that. But the punchline of it is if you eat 2 handfuls, you don't get 34%, you still just get the 17%. It's flat. Like it has this really strong peak. Yeah, you totally should have done that, and now it's just empty calories. Like that's all you get. And olive oil has the same profile. And there's one thing in common between olive oil and nuts, and that is the monounsaturated fat. So I'm guessing, like I think avocados would also fall in this thing, but I don't have the observational studies for that because it's kind of more recent. Then as we continue down the list and talk about glucosamine, this is it's a joint medicine. It's a supplement, the only supplement to make the list because we actually have a lot of data on people just taking it for their knees, and we have enough of that we can say from the observational data that actually it does reduce all-cause mortality, premature death, by about 10%. And then the last one here, very popular here in Japan, is fish. The only meat to be on the positive side is, well, actually, we'll get to legumes later, but the only meat that's positive, and up to 200 grams a day is, we found people who eat that, and that has quite a significant benefit for all-cause, for lengthening your life. So then as we get beyond the basics, we go to the C tier, and these are the cautions, right? These are the things, yeah, maybe you shouldn't eat that. And by the way, I just want to be clear, I eat all these things. So it's all about the dosage and how often you eat them. But here we have things like processed meat, sugary beverages, and red meat, and also eggs. Processed meat is any kind of processed meat. It's hams, salami, deli turkey, where you get it kind of in the thing, or pepperoni. Sugary beverages, and this is a fun one. I oftentimes am asked, as someone who's researching longevity and trying to live as long as I can, I like cookies just as much as the next person. I'm looking forward to those Christmas cookies right now. But the real place where sugar is very negative for longevity and health is when it's liquid. So sugar itself in like snacks or frosting or as a dessert is fine. But if you drink it, it just hits your body faster than your body can respond to. And they find this has a very negative effect on all-cause mortality. And this includes things even like kombucha, which is going to be then, it's a sweet kind of tea, fermented tea, but the sugar is still in it. You can still see it on the label. Or if you drink coffee with added sugar, that's also bad. But it doesn't include things like milk seems to be fine. And we'll get to dairy in a minute, other things. But it's only when you drink it, that's even if it's orange juice or a smoothie or something, it's still sugar water. Then legumes, beans we talked about before, another great source of fiber, very healthy. You can eat quite a few servings of that and get benefit. Eggs at more than one a day becomes more negative. And red meat, mentioned before, this is pork and beef. And then here we get at the bottom, now we're getting into dental habits. Now we have flossing. They can actually track that back to increasing your lifespan. The inflammation, and by the way, I'm a bit biased, and this is my father is a dentist, so, you know, maybe I'm trying to make my dad proud, at last taking some of his learnings. The bacteria and infections that you get in your mouth spread throughout in your entire body. They find the bacteria, the Streptococcus mutans, which is the cavity bacteria. If you have infections of that, they find that throughout your entire system because of the inflammation and other things. So flossing once a day is a C-tier activity that can give you additional lifespan. Okay, so let's see. I should have had this like as a guess what's on the next slide. But so now we are here at the D tier. And I think of this as the distractions tier. Like, lots of people think these are the main things they should be doing, but the benefit you get here for the effort is not nearly as much as you would think. Right here we have the things that you might have thought would be on the list up at the high top, right? You've got fruits and vegetables. But honestly, most of us have listened a little bit and have some fruits and vegetables most of the time, and at about 2 servings, the benefits cap out. There's just like, you don't get any more benefit out of it. And lots of people who are trying to live healthy are trying to eat fruits and vegetables all day long. I did that for a year, as we mentioned, in my self-experimentation, and the thing that I found that it did for me was it had my dentist warn me about cavities for too much fruit sugar, which I haven't had since I was 15. But aside from that, it doesn't give you nearly as much benefit as some of the other healthier foods. We also have the decaffeinated coffee and tea that I mentioned. We have hot peppers. So here we now get into the spicy stuff, right? So people who eat like a whole hot spicy pepper at least once a month have longer longevity. Great. That's kind of a freebie, you know, if you like it, go ahead. Also, here we have brushing your teeth. And this is one of the funny ones that I think is sort of the evidence that there's a real thing happening here, and it's not just of course healthy people brush their teeth. Because you get a longevity benefit for brushing your teeth only at night. Brushing your teeth in the morning, great, probably gives you fresh breath, 0 impact on longevity. There's something about before you go to bed that your salivary glands or something go down, you need to clean out your teeth then, and then it gives you a longer life. But a number of times a day, but earlier, none of that seems to make a difference. It's just doing it before you go to bed. So, and here we have instant coffee, which is sort of there's where it fits. Dairy is unhealthy after about a cup or 2 a day. So a cup or 2 a day is fine. After then, it then becomes linearly bad with the more you drink. Right, and then we have the no harm, no foul, no benefit. These are neutral in longevity terms. So if you're looking for some meat, poultry is not bad for you. It's not good for you like fish, but it's not bad. And refined grains. So all those fancy cakes and desserts and stuff is not shortening your life or lengthening it. It's empty calories, but you can get things from the other things. So that's a lot of information, and I mean, I live this because I'm reading this and trying to find these things and see how to put it together. But it's difficult to build the habits to do this, and I've been talking about this with my friends and acquaintances for several years as I come up with research. This is my latest thing. Did you know legumes, right? Like, but when my friend challenged me and he said, "Okay, look, give me a plan. I need to figure out what I need to do." So then I looked at sort of the whole thing, and I said, okay, well, for the plan then, we're going to focus on the big hitters. We're going to hit the activity tier and the S tier as what you're going to get the most benefit for your time for. And one of the things that is not well known is that actually the dosage for this, the optimal dose, is not as much as you think. And that's one of the things that I love. When you get into the real details of the numbers, you can also see in the charts of like, okay, you ate 20 grams of nuts, it gave you a huge benefit. You ate 40 grams, you got nothing more for it. And we see this in many of the other things as well. For instance, in the aerobic training, aerobic exercise has a similar kind of thing, where if you're doing aerobic exercise every week, massive benefit of about 35% reduction in all-cause mortality. If you're doing it twice a week, also about a 35% reduction in all-cause mortality. There's no increase on it, right? So, okay, do it once a week. So I put these together in a plan and was working with my friend on them. And then some of my other friends said, hey, how come he gets a plan? Like, we would like to do this too. So I'm like, okay. So I opened it up then. It had about 20 of my friends signed up and said, okay, well, we'll do this together. So I put it together as a year-long plan. And so for each of it's 4 quarter-long plans, quarter-long activities to live a long and a healthy life, right? So this became then the Unaging Challenge 2025, which I'm launching next year on January 6th. It's free. I think this kind of information is useful, and all I have to do is make a Google spreadsheet, which Google gives me for free, so I'll pass that on. But I've been very heartened to do this with my friends and to work through this together, because I've been talking about exercise, and this is a great idea for years, and honestly, they hadn't done much, right? But when I put it as a spreadsheet, I said, okay, we're all going to do this together as a challenge. You can see how everyone else is doing. They can see what you're doing. all of a sudden the participation went much higher. And right, like all of a sudden it became real. It's like, okay, we're doing this as a challenge. And the whole idea behind it is we're going to do it for 12 weeks. Right? We'll do it for 12 weeks, and I'll put together the structure for it so you get the best dosage out of it, you get the build of it, and you decide how to hit the benchmarks. So as a spoiler, for the first 12 weeks, it focuses on high-intensity interval training, which you have to get your heart rate up to about 90%. It's really hard effort. But one of the nice things about it is that 90% is based off of your heart rate. It's relative for wherever you start at. For the people who are not fit, they just need to do whatever would take them up to 90%. And for the people who are fit, they of course have to work harder, but it's still 90%. Like maximum effort, whatever your effort is at, that's maximum for you. So I have had people who had done no training at all, came into the program, and they get the most benefit because they have a lot of room to go. And I've also had people who are quite trained, doing half marathons, another thing, who also did the program, and they also found benefit of it because they learned sort of the optimum dose and maybe did a bit of things they didn't know. So also the other part of it is that people are free to choose whatever it is that you want to do. So one of my good friends was willing to do the challenge. He said, I hate running. I'm not running. No, I'm like, so he's instead doing jumping jacks in his house to get to the maximum heart rate. So it's all open to you. Some people are bicycling. Some people are using the elliptical machine in the gym. It's all up to you for kind of what you feel would do that. And all I have to do is put a spreadsheet, and you put there what you did, like how it went for you and also what your metrics are. So one of the other requirements that I've asked people to do is to get some kind of a smartwatch or something that tracks the heart rate so that they can then see how they're progressing or how it's going. Right, so it started, right now we've already done the cardio training, and also we've done strength training, which was the second challenge. And here we have the data. This is week 1, session 1, week 2, session 2, etc. And this is about the 20 people. And it's kind of hard to process, so we'll put a little bit of form behind it. So this is the beginner gains for the win. This is how much strength they gained. So it's a very simple calculation, basically just based off of how much capacity they had. And the people who were the beginners, untrained, had the most improvement, nearly twice as much over the period. I mean, a lot of that is just getting used to it, right? They haven't done the weights before. But people, again, were able to adapt this to what they had available. Some people did this at a home gym. Some people found they had a great gym down the street and fell in love with it, and they go there all the time now. But it's able to be done with whatever you have and whatever your level is at. And for those of us who were trained, the gains were not quite as great, but still I was able to gain 10%, and that seemed to be fairly typical for the people who were already doing weightlifting, just from going through a different structure and a different maybe routine than people were used to. Right, so let's come back to the beginning of it. Well, actually, no, let's talk about this is what we achieved. So over the 12 weeks, in total, between the 20 people, and adding up all their lifts of twice a week and every single lift that they did, total weight was 1.5 million kilograms of weight lifted, which happens to be the weight of Boeing 747 fully loaded. Right, so this is effectively how much as a team we lifted over the 12 weeks. But that's the team. To put a face to it, this is Blaine, the person who was with me and asked me, look, I'm getting winded just climbing a flight of stairs. I need a program for this. And then after working with Blaine, then my other friends said, okay, look, we want to do this as well. So this is the early adopters, about 20 people or so, that came together to do this. So I'm very excited to say that already for the 2025 challenge, we have 100 people who are registered. So we have 6 separate teams with about 10 to 20 people on each team. We'll be sharing a spreadsheet for them. And there will be good data coming out of this. I'll find out sort of like more what benefits for people and see how they do it. And also I plan to track more of it across the entire period. So my studies say that this is the minimum dose, but one of the things I'll get to test is during the program to see whether that's really true. Like, were people able to maintain the benefits they got in the earlier phases, say during the cardio kickoff, when they're doing a reduced amount of cardio because they're now focusing on strength training as the primary. So it's an exciting effort, and here's the QR codes are all the rage. So I have a QR code here for signing up if you're interested in trying a different challenge for 2025. Also, you can just go to unaging.com, my website, take a look at it there. I have a lot of reading about all these things about coffee and sugar and everything else that you might want to know about. So thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll join us for 2025. Okay.
All right, so we got to do the Q&A. Sorry, I'm going to do it from, I got to sit down here because I got to manage all the mics. What number is that, Melvin? Number 3. Thank you.
Is this working? Is
Yes.
Yes.
I hear you.
Yes, it is. Well, thanks for the talk. So since you spend like so much time like going through such a huge amount of information, I'm kind of curious as to whether you found something like quite curious and unintuitive. Say you get this substance or you eat this whatever, 1 gram is like the most amazing thing you get, and then you get actually negative effects. So can you actually reverse the effects of some good stuff like in small quantities? And let's say, of course, that's true for most of the things you probably listed, but is there one thing that you thought, that's surprising?
Yeah, the biggest thing that jumped out for me for having not like a U of benefits, right, where you get a reduction and then it kind of peaks up, but actually I call it a V for weightlifting, strength training. So the optimal amount for longevity of weightlifting, strength training, is 1 hour total time per week. That's it. Like, so if you talk about like someone who Brian Johnson who lists an hour every day, yeah, so it's very surprising. So there's cardiovascular issues and other things that happen, and if you're lifting more than 2.5 hours total time in the week, you now have a longevity the same as if you'd never gone to the gym in the first place. So I lose a lot of people when I'm talking to the gym, people who love the gym. I grew to like the gym as well. They're just like, okay, now I'm not listening to you, right? It is one of the things that I say, if you're trying to build things, if you're going to a competition or something, then absolutely, you should be going to the gym every day of the week. But if you look at it in the long term, is that a good habit to do forever? Maybe you don't need to. Yeah, good question. Thanks. Yes.
So I have a question about the confounds in your data. So this is actually, it's nerd night, guys. Come on. All right. So you're talking about walking and aerobic exercise. A lot of the people who are doing that walking and aerobic exercise are the ones who are getting those 12,000 steps in. Mm-hmm. So, most of, many of the people I know who get their 12,000 steps aren't getting it by just walking around. They're getting the 12,000 steps by running, by doing other activities, and that get caught by their Fitbits or whatever else they're using. Mm-hmm. So how are you teasing that out of the data?
The aerobic exercise doesn't count. Doesn't count. Like the study that
but how are you counting it?
So the study that I used as the reference for that one, we're using accelerometers to count the steps. Okay. And if the accelerometer is going at a pace that would be considered medium or vigorous physical activity, it's not counted towards the step count. So they did it algorithmically with the measurement device to say, there's a difference between when you're running and when you're walking, and they discounted all of those because I already knew from before that aerobic exercise gives you no benefit after the first 20 minutes or so a week. And so I was very concerned with this question of like, okay, and so it's been one of the challenges with my early adopters is say, okay, you need to walk, the challenge is to walk 12,000 steps a day, and running steps don't count. Has to be walking in order to get the full benefit of it. So it is definitely something that I've thought a lot about it, and it appears to be very important that you make the distinction. Thanks for the question. I think the person on the mics gets the next question.
Number one. Number one. What's number one doing in the mix now?
Test. Okay, it's on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for an interesting talk. I think nowadays, managing fitness can feel like a full-time job. Sleep this much, exercise this much. Mm-hmm. How do you manage for stress? You're telling these people you've got to walk 12,000 steps a day, you've got to run this much, you've got to work out this much while having a life and kids. And I think stress is a big factor in decreasing, I think.
Yes.
How do you manage for that? And what if someone's like, oh, I can only walk night? Yeah. How do you manage that in terms of your study?
So the elevator pitch, or the short summary of the goal, is 90 minutes weekly exercise, 20 extra years of expected life. Okay, so that's labeled out of the front, 90 minutes of exercise. And as I said, some of it we go into like a build phase so that you get used to it, you build the habit of it, you get the benefits of it, you're like, yeah, okay, this is great. And then we drop it down. So in the first challenge for the first 12 weeks, we're doing the 90 minutes is purely high intensity interval training, right? And then you get used to that, you kind of see how that goes. By the end of 12 weeks, maximum effort still sucks, but you know how to do it and you're used to it. But then after that, for the rest of the entire program, you only do the high intensity interval training for one period of 30 minutes a week, as now we move the 2 of those sessions over to the strength training to build on that. So at any given time, you're only doing 90 minutes total time a week. And honestly, by the end of it, you could be doing just 60 minutes. But the walking is just a chunk. I have a walking desk. That's how I do that personally. But yeah, but it's definitely, the entire program is designed to be something that can be fit in with other things. Thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
I wonder if you have any idea about why walking is so beneficial. I mean, like aerobic exercise or HIIT may increase your VO2 max, or your strength training may be good for balance or reduced falls, things like that. So why exactly would walking be so beneficial, do you think?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm a mathematician, not a doctor. So that's why I like the all-cause mortality, because then I can just close my eyes to the mechanisms and look, did they die early or not? So I'm kind of blind to that. I've seen some interesting ideas to say that one is like your legs are like a secondary heart. That like basically every time you move your calves, you're basically getting the blood flow. This is the hardest place to get your blood to return to the heart from. And so one of the theories behind that, and then of course the program, they say, okay, so if you sit at your desk and you do this day, you'll live longer, which go for the whole exercise. The other part of it, and this is something that I've just recently been exploring, is that it seems like actually sunlight could be a big factor out of that too. It could account for maybe a third or something of the overall benefit. It's not enough to account for all of it, but that could be one of the other beneficial parts of it. Except when it's cloudy or raining, yes. Just hold on a second. So those are the things that I can think of for it. The other part is, like, I started out trying to look at whether it was bad to be sitting too much during the day. And that has this, like they're trying to say that if you sit for 12 hours, like at your job, because many people have jobs where you sit for a long period, that's totally fine. But if you sit for 14 hours a day, all of a sudden it's bad. And I'm just trying to think of, like, what would be the mechanism that just does nothing for 12 hours, then at 14 goes bad. I'm like, no, what's really happening is if you're sitting for like 14 or 16 hours a day, you're not walking at all, right? So that's when I started to focus on the walking, is it just seems to be that keeps you from sitting all day, is one of the other explanations that I came up for it. Okay? Thanks for the question. You got the mark. Okay. Trumped. Sorry.
I'll try to be quick. Okay, so everything up here is an intervention. It's basically something, a habit that you can change personally. It's something you can take personal responsibility for.
Yes.
And all these things are great. They're fantastic. They're things that you should do. We're lucky to live in Tokyo, where walking is the norm, for example. Have you done any work or looked into environmental factors, things that as individuals we can't change necessarily, like, say, air pollution or chronic disease caused by, say, infectious disease, that sort of thing, and their effect on mortality, things that we could affect as a society, the use of, I don't know, microplastics or pesticides, and how those also factor into this.
I've had quite a bit of thought about those things as well, and my off-the-cuff response is I think some of them are overrated, like the microplastics things. I've not been impressed by the studies on it, but sometimes it is what I think limits it. Like, one of my theories for why you don't get more benefit from aerobic exercise is because of the air pollution you have to breathe to get it, right? So if you're doing aerobic exercise, you take about 6 times as much oxygen in, you breathe as much as you would if you're walking, which could be, and according to the WHO standards, like, anyone who lives anywhere near a city is basically, is breathing air that the World Health Organization says is unhealthy. Like you have to be like in the forest of the Amazon or something to not be. And so that's one place where I think that comes up. The second thing is when I talked about the limited benefits of fruits and vegetables, I've seen some research that said that that's because if you eat too much fruits and vegetables, you start to get too much pesticides with them. Right? And so you have then an exponential effect that's coming in that causes increased cancer. And that can be solved by getting organics. For those of us who live in Tokyo, it's not that easy. So it does come in a few places. I see it oftentimes as a limit to the benefit you can get to something because then eventually the pollution effects can become more strong. Okay?
Yeah. Hey, here.
Hi.
So why is strength gain an acceptable pseudo metric that you're looking at in your program? And related to that, why wouldn't exogenous creatine or protein be an acceptable improvement to the strength gain and hence an improvement to all-cause mortality if it is an acceptable metric?
Oh, they are, both of them. I recommend creatine and protein during the strength training. That's probably where my 10% came from, was probably the creatine. Creatine is a very safe, it's a very cheap supplement you can use that will increase your strength and endurance when you're doing strength training. And I do recommend it. It's well documented, been around for decades, and does help you to lift more. The reason that I choose the strength as the metric for many of these things is because it's difficult to find a metric that actually shows you the benefit of it. But one is it's fun. So you can see number go up, that it's like you see the results of the training that you go through, as I said, especially for the people who are new to it, to see an 80% gain. And it's funny because it's a straight number that is based off of the total amount of weight that you lifted. And so the people in the test were starting to game the system, right? They're starting to do leg press, which is not the best exercise, but you can move the most weight with it. So there is a certain amount of gameplay for that, but there's not another metric that I know of that would represent the health gains of it. It's kind of like walking in that we know that will extend your life, and that continued strength training will maintain your strength and throughout your years. It's the number one. An 80-year-old who lifts weight can be stronger than like a 20-year-old who doesn't get off the couch. So it's definitely the training is sufficient, so then the strength and how much you can lift is a fun way to quantify.
Okay, thank you for your very interesting talk. So the data that you showed was quite interesting, like coming from the protein question. The natural sources of protein that you mentioned, like red meat's bad, we kind of all know it, but like legumes is like slightly bad, it's like in C tier, I guess?
Legumes was C tier, yes.
Yeah, and like eggs are bad, poultry is neutral, so like all the natural source of protein, like they have like
fish.
hardly, except fish, like, but.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't consider it because I don't eat.
Okay, well then, yes.
Yeah, they don't even consider a meat here, so it's fun for me. So, like, why do you think like it's like kind of like hinting toward like bit of exercise and more sedentary lifestyle? It's like kind of mix of two. So, do you think that like the key for longevity is like you don't go like full on ham towards like muscle building? It's more like towards like endurance plus a bit of sedentary lifestyle. It's just kind of mix of two, but with the like kind of like more how can I say, more lenient diet, like do not like consume too much of proteins.
Yes, I would. I mean, the proteins, there's something called the protein leverage, which is a specific factor that talks about if you don't get enough protein in your diet, it increases your hunger quite significantly. And this is what people who are on a vegan diet oftentimes will struggle through, is that it's difficult for them to get a really high protein source, and so they want more protein. So I am, I don't know, pro-protein, I guess, but yeah.
It's an important part.
Yes, it is an overall important part. And the longevity studies definitely show that if you're even if it's muscle, if you're over-muscled, it doesn't add extra life. It's one of the things that they've shown doesn't add as much life as you would of more of a lean build. So I would agree with that. Like, walking is going to get you more over the long period than, say, extensive weightlifting, and also for the running as well, like the certain dose. And a lot of it is just about maintaining and keeping over the long period as opposed to building up a short period and then kind of giving up the habit.
Okay, thank you.
Last question is the fellow with the beer. You got it?
You can talk to me later.
All right.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi.
So I have a pretty extreme question, but where is the ethical limit in prolonging lifespans, considering how research is conducted and how it benefits society? I mean, Japan has a famously aging population and wouldn't necessarily benefit. And especially today, I mean, technology like CRISPR, which is a method of direct gene alteration, is being worked on. So how would you draw the line between a healthy life and, as mentioned before, becoming the supervillain in a Marvel comic?
Wow, we went supervillain pretty fast there. So, so for the good news or the bad news is that honestly, spoiler is that no one really makes it past 100 almost. Like if you make it to 110, like you're in the Wikipedia right there. So with all of these things, unfortunately, I have in my calculations for longevity for the actuarial table, when I first did it, I kind of added up all the things, then I did everything, and then it said I was going to live to 200 years old. And I'm not going to live to 200 years old unless someone invents some kind of a new technology. So I do think this is an attempt to live long enough till they get the supervillain serum that will enable us to live longer. But in the more philosophical question that you point out of like, is it a good thing if we live too long? I had this argument with my mother all the time. She's like, we got too many people already. I'm ready to die. I'm like, I don't want you to do that. But I think that our greatest strength actually is the brain power. And even if we think that like the Malthusian disaster, we have too many people, we won't be able to survive, has always been countered by new inventions that were made by the brains that were alive at the time. So I think that if we continue to expand lifespan, we'll continue to expand the opportunities. So I think it's a net positive if people live longer as opposed to a villainous action.
All right. And, thank you. Sorry, just juggling the mics. Which one am I on now? All right. So no, I'm on number 2.
Can I have the mic for a moment?
Oh, you want the mic from? All right. Okay.
Yep. It's on. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Before we finish, before Andrew wraps things up, speaking of a long life, I just want to remind everyone, this is Andrew's birthday today.
Yay!
We can sing.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Andrew. Happy birthday to you.
And the people on the live stream only heard Crissman sing.
I know. I was a little nervous about that.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Let me now wrap this up. I got a couple. I need you to hit some buttons. First of all, Crissman, thank you so much. Let's just give Crissman another round of applause. Thank you.